You type the message, and then you delete it. Not because it's wrong, because it isn't long enough. Can't make it tonight, sorry. That's the whole truth. And it sits there on the screen looking naked. So you add a reason. Then a smaller reason underneath the reason, in case the first one isn't convincing enough on its own. Then you read it back once, twice, and it still feels like it's missing something, so you add one more line, something about how much you wanted to come, something about next time. By the time you hit send, the message is 4 sentences long, and the plan you're canceling only took 2 to make. You don't notice this. Why would you? It's just a text. 6:40 the next morning, the alarm doesn't go off. Or maybe it does and you don't hear it. And either way, you're 9 minutes behind the version of the morning you'd planned. 9 minutes doesn't sound like much until you're standing in the elevator at work, rehearsing what you're going to say when someone notices. Nobody asks. You tell them anyway. The alarm, the snooze, the traffic on the bridge, the guy who cut you off near the exit, the whole sequence offered up before anyone has so much as looked at the clock. Your coworker nods, half listening, already back at her screen. You keep going for another sentence or two just to make sure the story lands. It's not a lie. Every part of it happened. That's what makes it hard to notice. None of it is dishonest. It's just more than anyone asked for, delivered like evidence, to a jury that was never assembled. You've done this before. You'll do it again tomorrow about something else entirely. A missed call, a late reply, a parking spot you took that somebody else might have wanted. Maybe you're just being polite. Maybe you were raised to think silence is rude. That's a reasonable thing to believe, and for a long time it's true enough that you never have to look at it any closer. At home that evening, there's a stack of mail on the counter you haven't opened, and next to it, a small pad of yellow sticky notes you keep for exactly this kind of thing. You write one now, sorting through this weekend promise, and press it onto the top envelope before anyone can ask why it's still there. Nobody's home yet. You wrote the note for a room with nobody in it. This is the first time the notes appear, but it won't be the last. They start small and specific, a reason for the dishes still in the sink, a reason the trash didn't make it out, a reason the plant on the windowsill looks the way it looks. Little paper apologies, left where someone will find them before they have the chance to wonder. You tell yourself it's considerate. You're saving someone the trouble of asking. You're not the kind of person who leaves things unexplained. Maybe that's true. Maybe you're just tired, and this is easier than a conversation. Maybe you'd rather leave a note than be in the room when the question gets asked out loud. Your partner comes home a little after 7. There are 2 dishes in the sink, just 2 from breakfast. And before they've even set their bag down, you're already talking. Something came up. You meant to get to it. You were on a call that ran long, and then you lost track of time, and then, it's fine, they say. It's 2 plates. You keep going anyway. You tell them about the call. You tell them what the call was about. You tell them you'll do it right now, and you do, standing at the sink narrating your own innocence to a room that has already stopped listening. They're not upset. That's the part that should tell you something. Nobody accused you of anything, and you still built a defense. You've started to notice, faintly, that the explaining doesn't happen after someone raises a question. It happens before, as a kind of insurance, in case the question was coming. You'd rather hand over the reason unasked than risk being caught without one. That's not politeness. That's a habit of expecting to be found guilty. You're not ready to think about it that way yet. So you don't. A few weeks later, a friend invites you to something on a night you don't want to go. Not a big deal. A dinner, nothing formal. You could just say no. You have the right to just say no. Instead, you sit with the message for 11 minutes, drafting something that reads less like a decline and more like a closing argument. Work has been a lot. You haven't been sleeping. You've got an early morning. You really wish the timing were different. You'll make it up to them soon. Your friend writes back a single line. No worries at all. You read it twice, looking for the disappointment underneath it. There isn't any. There was never going to be any. You built a whole case for a jury that once again wasn't in the room. For a moment this bothers you, though you couldn't say exactly why. Something about the effort. Something about how tired you are, and how none of that tiredness was actually necessary. Then, for a while, it gets better. One evening your partner asks if you can grab something on the way home, and you just say, "Can't tonight, running behind." Nothing else. You hang up before the anxious follow-up sentence can form, and you notice, almost with surprise, that nothing bad happens. No silence, no follow-up question. The world doesn't require the rest of the paragraph. It feels lighter than it should, like putting down something you didn't realize you'd been carrying with both hands. You start to think maybe this was never really a problem. Maybe it was just a phase, a stretch of being overly conscientious, and now you're growing out of it, the way people grow out of things. For a few days, the sticky notes stay in the drawer. Then your manager stops by your desk on a Tuesday about a report that's a day late, and you feel the old current start moving before she's even finished her sentence. The client rescheduled. Then the data came in wrong. Then you had to redo half of it. Then she holds up a hand, not unkindly. You don't have to explain. Just let me know when it's done. You say, "Okay." You mean it when you say it. And then, almost without deciding to, you add one more sentence, just so she has the full picture, and she nods and walks away before you finish it. It wasn't the report that upset you. It was that she meant it kindly, and it still felt like being caught doing something you'd been doing so long you'd forgotten it was optional. The improvement from a few days ago hadn't gone anywhere. It had just changed address, moved from your evenings into your workdays, the way water finds a new crack once the old one's been patched. That weekend, you're standing in a checkout line holding a bottle of wine and a frozen pizza at 2 in the afternoon. And the cashier, who has said nothing, who is scanning items and thinking about her own afternoon, gets a small explanation anyway. "Long week," you say, "treating myself," offered to someone who never once looked like she was judging your groceries. She smiles politely and tells you the total. You walk out to the car and sit there for a second before starting the engine, turning that moment over. Nobody in that store cared what you were buying or why. You'd handed a stranger a reason for something she never asked about, the same way you hand one to a coworker, a partner, a friend declining dinner, a kitchen with nobody standing in it. You start counting without meaning to. How many times today? How many times this week? The number keeps climbing the longer you look for it, which is its own kind of answer. That night, you sit at the kitchen table with the pad of yellow notes in front of you, and for the first time, you actually look at it instead of reaching for it. There's a half-used stack left, 20, maybe 30 sheets, each one a small, unprompted account of yourself, written for rooms that were mostly empty when you wrote them. You start to remember the ones from before this one. The note about the unopened mail, the one about the trash. One, months back, about a chipped mug you didn't want anyone to ask about, so you left an explanation taped to the cabinet before the question could exist. You were never explaining to the people who lived with you. You were explaining to a version of them who was always about to be disappointed in you. A person who, as far as you can tell now, never actually showed up. That's the part that sits heavy. Not that you over-explained, that you built an entire audience out of people who weren't watching, and then spent years performing for them anyway. The word for it doesn't arrive with any drama. It's not a diagnosis, not a label someone hands you. It just settles quietly, the way a fact settles when you've been circling it long enough, that this was never really about manners, or consideration, or being a thoughtful person who doesn't like to leave others wondering. It was about staying one sentence ahead of being blamed for something. Even when no one was building a case against you. Even when the only prosecutor in the room had always been you. You think about the friend's one-line reply, the manager's raised hand, your partner standing in the kitchen already saying it's fine before you'd gotten past the second excuse. All those moments where the explanation showed up to a trial that was never scheduled, defending you against a verdict nobody was preparing to hand down. Later that week, your partner asks again if you can pick something up on the way home. You start to answer the old way, "I would, but," and catch it mid-sentence, the way you'd catch your foot before a step you already know is missing. "Can't tonight," you say, and stop there. There's a small silence on the line. Not a hurt one, just a silence, the ordinary kind that exists when nobody has anything else to add. You wait for the old instinct to fill it, and this time you let it stay empty instead. "Okay," they say. "See you soon." That's the whole conversation. No paragraph, no jury, no case built and delivered before anyone asked to see one. The sticky notepad is still on the counter the next morning, mail stacked beside it, unopened again. You almost reach for a sheet out of habit, pen already in hand, before you notice what you're doing and set the pen back down. You don't write a note this time. You just move the mail to where you'll actually deal with it and leave the counter the way it is. A little unfinished, a little unexplained, the kind of ordinary mess that doesn't require a defense taped on top of it. Nothing gets said about it. Nobody needed it explained. You'd spent so long making sure no one could catch you unprepared that you never noticed the trial had been empty the whole time. That you were the only one who ever showed up to it, sentence after sentence, note after note, explaining yourself to no one, for years, because it had never once occurred to you that you were allowed to just stop.